Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
I missed you guys.
Oh, that's so sweet of you.
We're back together.
It's been a lot of oops all guests.
Yeah.
We've interviewed a lot of people, and there's more exciting guests to come.
Yeah.
Like we got
lots of good stuff coming.
In the
Lots of good stuff happened.
Yeah, Fuzz for Anna.
coming down the pipe.
And then,
is it the pike or the pipe?
Coming down the pike. Oh, goodness.
Is it
Someone's yelling at us.
I've heard people I think it's pike, but I've heard people say pipe too, and I don't know. It's those turns of phrases that
coming down the pipe to me.
Yeah, it's coming down the pipe.
It is pipe. Okay.
Something is going to happen in the future.
Leave it to me, Mr. Karaoke, to be wrong.
Good job.
Wait. It says AI is telling me via Google. I just Googled it. The correct expression is coming down the pike.
Oh.
Which means something will happen or appear in the near future. Coming down the pipe is sometimes used interchangeably. Likely because people are unfamiliar with the term pike.
I thought it was pike. The other one that I hear a lot of time is, a person flicked me off in traffic. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's flipped you off. You get flipped off, but you don't get flicked off.
Could you technically be both, depending on how they did it?
I suppose.
I don't know. We're getting too far.
If they were picking their nose and they like flicked a booger at the same time.
Good to be back, though.
I just, I missed us being around the table and having good conversations with one another. It's been so long, but we've had a lot of great conversations with other people. One thing we haven't had a conversation with is a person on the phone.
Ooh.
Did we get a voicemail?
Did we?
We do. We have a voicemail waiting for us, and here it is.
Hey, podcast party people. I've been listening recently, and you haven't had any good voicemails that I can remember. And this voicemail will keep that streak going. I was thinking that what we need to do is have another Hallmark movie, but do it a little bit different this time. I think Jess should pick a national day, and then Eric should pick a fact about the Nebraska Cornhuskers, the Creighton Blue Jays sports teams, and then Alex should have to come up with the plot for the Hallmark movie from those two prompts. I'll hang up and listen. Thanks.
Oh.
Why is that? Why would you give me the sports facts? I'm very upset about this. I don't know any sports.
You watch the Huskers. You got to know some facts about that.
I'm going to give you. We are not going to be hard on this guy because we know Alex is like that's just my vote.
Yeah. Okay.
Alex naturally is like really good at coming up with romantic things. We hear a lot. About what he does for Aaron.
Always.
I know. Okay. So
romancing my wife.
My holiday I'm going to pick is one of my favorites, which is Christmas.
Is that a national day? I think he's
it's a national holiday.
Day.
Okay.
Yeah, national holiday.
Day.
That's Christmas.
My guess is that they were trying to say, because I always talk about the random national days.
Well, you would talk about
that
a
nobody
national
cares about.
A national
knows
day
about,
because it's
me.
also your birthday.
It is my birthday.
So we can make it like Christmas theme, like National Santa Print Underwear Day.
How about this is what I'm going to say. It's Christmas, but you have to incorporate a birthday.
Because it's his birthday, because Christmas is his birthday.
The love story.
Okay. And what's the Husker fact?
Jeez, I don't know.
Or Creighton Blue Jays.
Let's see. Yeah. I mean, a fact can just be anything that's true, right? One of the facts that my favorite Husker coach was Bo Pelini. That's a fact. And another fact that I liked about him is the way he would chastise Husker fans for being so insufferable. So I did those are my facts.
Okay.
Do you need a second?
No, okay. So here is the plot of the story.
Yeah, baby, let's do it.
It had been many a years since the suffrages of Nebraska Cornhusker football. In the 90s, they were so good, and they had so much winning and all those things, led by Coach Tom Osborne, followed by Frank Solich, who they ran off for winning only 9 games one season.
Say it a little more peppy, so we're like, ooh,
okay.
We want to listen.
That's just kind of like the facts, okay?
You're setting it.
There was a young lady, and this young lady was young in the beginning, and she was a Runza salesman in the stadium. So she, from the time she grew up, was slinging Runzas at Memorial Stadium. Mm-hmm. And she loved those Runzas and slinging Runzas at Memorial Stadium. And one day in the 90s, she saw a man that she thought was cute. He was about 22 years old, and she thought he was cute. She saw him there every single year, every single game, until the year that Frank Solich got fired for only winning 9 games.
Okay.
He vowed he would never show up to another Husker game again until Nebraska started winning 9 games every year again, at least. So there was those eras of, of Bill Callahan where they weren't winning and all those things. They finally hired an upstart coach named Bo Pelini. And Bo, that was not his actual first name, but that is beside the
Rambo?
point. Rambo.
Short for Rambo Pelini?
Rambo Pelini. And Rambo Pelini joined the Husker staff as the coach. And this young man finally started coming back to the games. She was still slinging Runzas. But the problem was, somewhere in the middle of his exodus from Husker football games, he started liking Valentinos more. So
the plot twist.
Yes, the plot twist. He started liking Valentinos more and did not eat Runzas due to some cabbage allergies.
Okay.
that she discovered.
IBS.
He discovered. So anyway, what happened was after the IBS, yes, Jess, she had to figure out if she ever wanted to actually romance him again, she would have to figure out working for Valentino's and selling those pizzas. So she's wrote to Santa Claus, all I want for Christmas this next year is to be able to go from selling Runzas to selling Valentinos so that I can meet the man of my dreams and begin to again engage in conversations with him and help riz me up. So this is what happened. Santa granted the wish on a nice Christmas morn and said, next year you get to be a Runza pizza seller instead of, Valentino's pizza seller instead of a Runza seller. Next season they met up and he saw her.
What about the birthday?
Well, the birthday, the birthday is Christmas.
He was just getting there.
He saw her, and they had small talk. He's like, I thought you were selling Runza. She's like, no, now I'm selling Valentino's pizzas at Husker games.
Cheese or hamburger.
And then the magic moment was, she said, I asked Santa for Christmas if that's what I could do so I could be with you. And he said, I asked for my birthday that you would start selling Valentino's pizzas instead of Runza. So one day I would see you again. And they knew it was fate.
Wow.
And they got married on Christmas, which was his birthday. And it was a beautiful moment.
Wow.
And
that's a lot of holidays on one day. You got to celebrate a birthday and anniversary. And Christmas.
And Bo Pelini got on the internet, became a minister, and he was the one who ended up.
Oh, he did like an online
performing the wedding.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Wow.
So that's what he's doing nowadays after his coaching career is that he is performing weddings for people. Bo Pelini does marriages.com.
Yeah. It's a good site. Register that domain now. My favorite part is that right before we started recording, Jess was like, if there's a voicemail, I do not want to do.
I was like, I don't know if I have a Hallmark in me today.
A Hallmark
I
story.
don't know if I do.
I don't know that I did either, but
that was a beautiful
thank you
attempt. It was very good.
It's a lot. It's a lot of pressure all of a sudden that comes on you.
Yeah, you're right.
But
you did a good job. You did a good job.
That was hilarious. Thank you for that voicemail.
So, that
was a team effort too.
Yeah, a little bit. We all kind of chipped in where we could. Because this is the first time we've been together in a little while. Is there any life updates? Anybody need to share anything? Everybody good? Everybody's doing well? Having fun? You had to probably winterize your pool, Alex.
I was wondering. Another season we didn't get invited over, Eric.
Yeah.
But there's always next year.
Mm-hmm.
There is.
All right. That's always good. I just want to check in.
Yeah, we're good.
There's probably, there's enough things going on that people are maybe stressed out about. Who knows? I don't know. But we are going to be talking about our post-election reflections. I like the the ring that adds to it, kind of rhymey. So we're going to help you kind of either, decompress and maybe celebrate or grieve. I don't know, wherever you landed. But that's up next. The results are in. All the Chads have been accounted for, and they're not hanging, or I don't know if is hanging Chad still a thing.
Probably.
That's like
I don't know. Probably not.
Al Gore era thing, a Gore Bush thing. Dating myself. Sorry, not in like a weird way.
No,
I'm dating, like I'm not dating myself. Anyways.
No judgment.
We're going to be talking about the election and Mr. Donald Trump, president once, is now president again.
President-elect.
Yeah, he's elect. Yeah, I guess he's got till January, right, to get the thing all finalized and put away. I really didn't know where this one. I didn't even have a sense of who was going to win this one. I felt so across the board. I'm just like, what? I don't know who's going to get it. I mean, there's just different. I think there was early on signs when, like with the assassination attempt and Biden, mental issues and just his decrees and all that stuff, the debate. And I'm just like, this feels like Trump has it. But then with Kamala, I thought, there's some new blood in here. It's like a younger person, like someone that could kind of do away with some of the old ways. And I think that was kind of
revitalizing. I mean, I think it definitely revitalized the opportunity for there to even be a contest. Yeah. I mean, the money that came in once she became the person that was running in the nomination, all that kind of stuff, certainly added much needed, I would probably say, energy to the Democratic Party at that time.
Which I think it made it, for me at least, I was like, okay, I feel like it could go either way depending on where people are at. But I mean, it kind of feels like it came down to economic issues. I feel like a lot of people were voting for Trump because they feel like he can solve this problem of inflation, whether that is misguided or not. That seems to be where we are. I'm trying to choose, to look on the positive side of this the best I can. I'm not like I don't know. I'm very politically. I typically fall in the middle, so I kind of vote for the person, and I care a lot about integrity, and Donald Trump doesn't always check those boxes for me. But one positive is I know for 4 years I won't have any of my family members try to tell me that the election was rigged. So that's pretty exciting to me. That's a positive one. And as Americans, we like to break records. So this was the first time that we've had a convicted felon and a president that was impeached twice be elected as a president. So that's a record-breaking thing. But it's just an interesting thing, and I think it speaks so loudly to where the American people are in their frustrations, and it's less about a person's character and even the words that they say, and more about what they stand for in the eyes of the people. And I think that's kind of where we are. And Americans were heard very loud and clearly, I think, with this election.
Mm-hmm. I also think our culture was different, at least in Omaha, with the Blue Dot movement. Because I feel like, I've grown up in Nebraska, and we are historically a red state with and all the electoral votes go to the Republican nominee usually, and it was just a different culture. I think we really got to see the diversity that's in Omaha, that's in Lincoln, and got to experience that more. But that, I think, is one of the reasons for me. Like, I wasn't sure who was going to win because I have friends on both sides, and I, even for me historically, fall in the middle, and so it's like I wasn't sure going in, like, where it was going to fall, especially in Omaha with lots of different opinions and voices. And even like my neighborhood was, driving down the streets, like I'm in an older neighborhood, but all the yard signs it was almost like 50-50. And that's really how it felt here. So yeah, it kind of came down to that for me. And then I think one thing that, and maybe we can get into this later too, that I noticed that kind of like fueled a lot of things around this election for me was I just noticed the messaging from both sides was democracy is on the line. Like the government is on the line,
Yeah.
like lots of things being on the line. And I'm not sure how I ended up interpreting that. If I felt like that was a scare tactic, a fearful.
I feel like that's something that we hear every 4
We
years,
do,
though. That
but
this
it's
is the
like it's
most
pushed.
important
Yes,
election
exactly.
that our generation is ever going to face. Every time we
And
hear
so
the
it's
same
like,
thing.
right, exactly. It's like this other voice that starts coming in and saying, like, if you don't, do this or do that, you're losing a lot. And so
Yeah.
Yeah.
just kind of.
I think undoubtedly, there was, you mentioned it, Jess, the uniquenesses, I think, especially in Omaha, in our district, in living in a space that is really contentious and divided, that we learned about it from Dr. Adkins, the social scientist from UNO that joined me a couple weeks ago, that the uniquenesses of Omaha and specifically Nebraska, and that historically it really wasn't a big deal, but then how much money, I think $20 million or so was spent at least trying to win this one single electoral college vote inside of our district. And then all of the other things that came into this election, I think 12 or somewhere around that, maybe 11 or 12 of the states were voting on amendments for abortion. And so that was like a huge thing that was a thing in just getting more and more people to the polls. Right. Obviously in Nebraska, we had 2 initiatives that were talked about. One that was, those would call it pro-abortion. 439, which would allow abortion and women's right to choose up until the birth of a baby, and then 434, which would cap that at 12 weeks outside of cases of incest or rape or abuse and some of those things. And so there was a lot of that happening because of Roe versus Wade being overturned and those turning to state decisions instead of a national decision. A lot of states had that on their ballot to kind of process through and things like that. So that definitely drove, I think, a lot more people towards the potential to vote and areas outside of just like the presidential race inside of this. And I think that overall, the interesting thing about this election is I did not hear, at least from where I was, and I probably was more disengaged this election cycle than I was in the last election cycle, just unplugged maybe from social media and things like that. But I didn't hear as many people. I definitely heard people confident about their candidate, but I heard a lot more people on both sides saying, I'm voting for the worst of two evils, or not. I'm not thrilled about who I'm even casting. I'm voting more against this person than for this person. So I just heard more and more of that, at least in the places that I ran this year, because I did a lot of running. And so as I was running, people would just yell that stuff out at me. And so it was very interesting this year during the election cycle. And so, I think there were so many interesting things that happened this year. One of the most interesting things for me, though, was this is the first real presidential election that I had kids, probably with the intellectual ability to understand and watch like the ads and things like that. And so I would ask my kids, who really all they know about politics really is YouTube ads and what they mostly actually what they see like on TV during Husker games. I mean, if you're watching any kind of sports game, it's just boom, 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 boom. So I asked my kids, who should I vote for? Just based off of that limited knowledge. And it was just funny to hear their responses, and I didn't realize how much they were able to just regurgitate. Like the political narratives and jargon that was out there. Well, my one daughter was like, well, Donald Trump's not healthy, so you shouldn't vote for a not healthy president, and that was one thing that she really clung to from an ad. So it gave us really opportunities to talk about the divisiveness, like the lies, like why is it just okay to lie and speak untruths about people and defamation of character, all the things that I'm used to, I guess, happening. And I've just kind of become, just oblivious almost to it. And all the text messages I got, so on and so forth. But really it made me start to think, okay, how are my kids seeing this? And just from that perspective, it reawakened me to how messy all of this really is, and how how disunifying it is, and all those kinds of things. And so for me, it just was another reminder of how, I guess, heartbreaking things were, but then had a lot of fascinating conversations again with Dr. Tracy McKenzie, just talking about some of our misinterpretations of American history, and that we've been here before, and how Christendom has been affected and infected in our culture. So yeah, I just had a lot of thoughts going into this election, but really no clue yesterday how in the world is this going to play out, because polls were all over the place. There was betting apps this year like that I had never seen before. Like people were putting money down on this. I think on Robinhood and other, places where you can basically, manage your own stocks and those types of things. You could essentially wager on it. It was just wild. And so I had a lot of feels going into this election, but also like a deeper sense of peace than I had in the last couple elections. I think I had more fear and worry in the last couple elections for a variety of reasons. And this one, it wasn't a peace or lack of worry because I knew who was going to win, but just probably resting in, like, we've been going through the stories of kings the last few years, and you're just like, I guess, encouragement that God uses messy kings to, and we were going to have one of those no matter what. Yeah. And so I just was encouraged and reminded of God's sovereignty, and not a Jesus juke way, but just a comforting way that, hey, I think this is going to be messy no matter who's elected, and we're up for just chaos and things that I'm not going to agree with, but God is still sovereign and on the throne. So just a lot there I dumped out on you guys.
I have a friend of mine who, every time we see someone post God's still on the throne, we send it to each other. It's just kind of a running gag, because every election season, that's like that's the saying that people say. And it's not that it's not true. It's just, it's kind of that, like, becomes this almost, I'm not saying that any way you were saying this passive aggressively, but it kind of becomes that, like, passive aggressive statement.
There's certain things we say at certain times.
I'm like, well, God's still on the throne. So, it's just, it's true. I think, depending on where you landed, there's people that are probably going to, you're living in this tension now. You mentioned it, Alex, with the blue dot of Nebraska, that the city is somewhat divided there on who they support. So people are definitely living with this tension now. But it's interesting what you said about the peace that came with this one, because I think there was an amount of that, just knowing that, like, I don't know, to a certain extent, it's beyond your control. You just, you can't get too emotionally invested into it. The outcome is going to be the outcome. You can go vote, do your civic duty. And at that point, you can just go put your head on the pillow and wake up and see the results. And I don't know how do we go forward, do you think, in that peace, continuing to carry that peace? Because I think you can easily say going into it, well, I had a lot of peace, and maybe that was, for some people, they had peace because they thought they knew how it was going to go, and now maybe they woke up this Wednesday morning and said, oh, I was wrong, and now maybe I don't have peace. How do we I don't know, address that? I guess I don't know. It just feels like there are tensions that are going to manifest no matter what. In America, it feels like it's a sporting thing. Like, people are rooting for their team, and then, you kind of trash talk the losing team. And it's just, I don't know specifically Christians, how do we enforce a good culture of conversation? Or,
first of all, I will say that, like, even as a woman voting, like, I'm very aware that it's been, like, no more, like, not very much over 100 years. I think it's been 104 years that women have been able to vote. And my sons have learned about Susan B. Anthony, like, this last month. This is going to tie into what you're saying, Eric, but she was arrested for voting. And so I took my 10-and-a-half-year-old with me to vote last night. And we were just having a conversation, and he was like, you would have been arrested for doing this. And so just like that awareness of like a child learning about history and how history used to repeat itself over and over and how that's changed just kind of put me in a different space, even voting. And then he stood next to me while I'm voting. And obviously like Alex highlighted, like there's abortion issues. And he's like, Mom, like you're a woman, like, what do you think about this? And like having that conversation. And in that, just really, that gave me peace that I have broken a cycle in my own life where my child feels comfortable to have conversations and the freedom to express like his own opinion and to ask me questions that I did not have.
Yeah.
And so I think part of that piece is knowing that no matter what happens or what's going on, we need to keep having those conversations, fostering safe places for growth and for our kids to feel safe and for us to feel safe and for people that believe different than us to feel safe. And I think that maybe sounds very simple, but I think that that's where it starts. And then I think there's this other part that's like, you have to protect your peace. And sometimes that's protecting your peace at a cost. Yeah. So like I came home last night from voting and my neighbors are outside and I opened the garage and I got out and my neighbor is yelling that has a son that lives with him that had just voted for Kamala. My neighbor doesn't believe in Trump or believes in like that Trump should be president and said, if Kamala wins, you have 30 days to get out of my house. So I know those neighbors. I could have gone out and engaged. And for me, I was so aware of my like anxiety and what I need for myself to protect my peace. I pushed that garage door opener and just closed my garage. It wasn't something I needed to be a part of. I could have interacted, but I think it's that awareness of what do I want to engage in? That goes for face-to-face conversations, Facebook, anything that you're tweeting at somebody. But I think there's a piece that can be protected. And if it's at a cost of not engaging or skipping an event, like that's not too much like to protect where you need to protect yourself.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot that goes into this, but one of the things I've been really thinking about, and I've been reading through Matthew again in the last, few days, kind of a chapter a day and studying it. And yesterday I was reading part of the Sermon on the Mount, which has been good timing. Part of it's because I knew going into the election cycle, I wanted to just kind of reframe my heart with Jesus and his kingdom manifesto, last night or anytime someone wins, there's plenty of people that got up during their, post-election speeches and gave their victory chant. And here's what I'm going to do. Here's how I'm going to change things. Thank you for voting for me. Thank you for following me. Thank you for all the money. And here's what we're going to do when we get to work. And Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount is essentially that of Jesus is for these people, the gathering, and they're wanting to know what this kingdom's all about, dude. When are you going to finally come in and dethrone all of these people? And so Jesus' Sermon on the Mount is like, hey, here's what my kingdom is going to be all about. And the ironic thing about it was vastly different than what everybody wanted to be promised at that time. And, as I was reading in Matthew 5 yesterday, since it was the 5th, a couple of things really stuck out to me. I put them on my Facebook because that's what cool pastors do and things like
Good
that.
job.
And I wanted people to know I read the Bible, but in all seriousness, it was good kingdom advice for me. And one of the things that's part of that is in Matthew 5:9, and Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God, sons and daughters of God." And I think one of the opportunities in there that maybe I was convicted of was not just being someone who is a peacekeeper, but a peacemaker. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a difference. It just struck me differently this time, like reading that, not to just be a peacekeeper. And I think sometimes that's a person that's passive and they're just trying to like make a situation that's not tense. But I think being a peacekeeper is moving across where there is chaos. It's moving across and reaching out to people that aren't at peace. And how do I make peace with maybe somebody when it involves the election that did vote differently than me, or maybe in your situation, Jess, that you just shared, it's like, how do I make peace between a father and a son that are really wrestling through this kind of stuff? And maybe that was said out of anger. Maybe it was said out of malice, out of the energy, you know, right now in the midst of the election. I hope so. Not that that's a good thing or a good excuse either way, but how am I somebody that's going to be bringing peace to the places that I am, bridging things, bridging the divides instead of deepening them? And so sometimes I think as Christians, you know, we do post the God is on the throne, and this is like this attempt to just be a peacekeeper and you highlight that. But I guess I'm wrestling with how do I become a peacemaker in the midst of this. I have family members that are deeply lamenting, you know, over multiple things in the election that they felt like they lost, that was taken from them, or so on and so forth. And so how do I know that this is what's happening? And how do I go and make peace with them? How do I, not that I had beef with them, but how do I help them sense the same kind of peace that's within me that really has nothing to do with who I am, but it has everything to do with who God is and the Spirit being alive inside of me. And so that's really one of the, you know, the challenges that the Spirit's been at least convicting me in, as far as like that peace question. Like, how am I not just going to hoard the peace I have, but how am I going to be a bringer of that peace and that kingdom, that shalom, into other places? I just said a lot there, I know, but
yeah, no, it's good. I mean, it's kind of ties to something we had in the outline here that I think it was ChristianPost.com posted that Tony Evans, Max Lucado, among 200 evangelical leaders, are vowing to be post-election peacemakers. So I think that kind of ties in to somewhat of what you're saying. Do you suppose that's easier said than done sort of situation? Like, because it feels like you could, I don't know. It feels like you could start out with the best intentions, but you've got, when someone engages, how do you maintain that, you know? Whether that's a comment online or something in person, do you just, what's your go-to? You know, is it don't engage at all, ignore it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think sometimes we set out with these big missions and big ideas, but then in the daily routine of life, it's pretty challenging to maintain that without letting it bother you. I don't know. What is that? Because I think even that, going back to that phrase, like he's still on the throne, like when we're talking about God's sovereignty, that is a truth. But when people don't feel that, you can't force them to feel peace either. The term peacemaker, I don't think it. I mean, it could be misleading.
Yeah.
Because you can't be a peace forcer or a peace enforcer. You can't force people to feel peace. But you can control within yourself and your surroundings, like what you do to maintain that peace that you sense. So.
I also if you're going to respond, Alex, like I'll add on to that and say that, like when I read the Christian Post about Tony Evans, Max Lucado, other pastors, that to me is coming out of a personal conviction, and it comes out of leadership. And so they're not responsible for, like, they're responsible for being leaders out of their conviction and speaking about peacemaking. But then I also have to correct in my brain too, like, that other people like that listen to them have to also be convicted of the same thing. So it's not like they're not responsible for their entire congregation and how they respond. Like, there is a conviction to me in peacemaking, and that being something that's a goal, or that being something that you're loving people out of, that, like, how does that translate to people? Well,
I think I guess the problem with finding things on the internet sometimes is that you realize, you think they're more current than they are. So I was just looking at this and realizing like this was like the last election cycle, actually.
I think we failed then.
And that I guess is kind of the point I'm going to bring up is I think having the intentions to do it.
Yeah.
I think really genuinely, that the title that they signed was a 2020 call for biblical peacemaking. And they did a similar one, but the article that I put up was apparently from 2020. They did one in 2024. But to me, it's like, wow, I don't think we did the best job in the last election being peacemakers. And this is an at-large thing, and I'm talking about, Christendom probably at large, how well they did. I'm sure there was plenty of people, and I saw plenty of people interpersonally doing a better job being a peacemaker, but at large in culture pushing like this identity of being peacemakers, it seemed like there was a lot more division actually stirred up post-election than anything. And so my hope, is that we have a little bit more success in actually doing this in the 2024, post-election, because yes, there was bigger races or, more prominent races, but not everything I voted for yesterday won, And so I think no matter what, everybody is going to have an opportunity to figure out, okay, how do I make peace in these spaces? And so
I think too, you look at 2020 was so divisive, and that there was a lot of social media chatter, and I think the lesson a lot of people learned over the last 4 years was that you're not really going to change anybody's mind. We talked about this, I think, ad nauseum, but you're not really going to change anybody's mind with a Facebook post. And I wonder if that's maybe where some of that peace that we felt going into this was, that in some ways the democratic process was just in full effect, and people kind of realized, hey, if I want my voice to be heard, the best and maybe only way to do that is to go vote. And so that's what people did. Mm-hmm. They turned out in record numbers and they voted. I don't know. I mean, in some ways that's encouraging to me, especially when you hear people kind of diagnosing this country as being near its demise, right? Or that America is on its way out or it's in decline. And I think, but our system, as far as I can tell, it's still working. The biggest problem I see is, do people actually listen to the words or the promises or, what the candidates actually are saying? And do they take that to heart, or is it just, like we've said, it's just the idea of what that person stands for? Because I think on both sides, there are things that are said at these rallies and stuff like that most people who voted for him never heard those words. But, they're still okay with it at the end of the day because it stands for something. And it just, at the end of the day, still just kind of feels like a popularity contest to me, which is kind of rough in some ways, because it's like, what are we really voting for? What, Alex, I think one of your, I forget his name, one of the gentlemen that you interviewed recently, like you talked about the two-party system and like, was that Randy?
Dr. Atkins, yeah.
Yeah, like would that go away, and it doesn't, like, foreseeable future. No, this is what it is. This is what we have. So
yeah, and there are solutions, and I think that's the other big thing that people have to realize. And I think there's so many mantras and so on and so forth. I'm sure everyone that gets elected will probably say, and now is when the real work starts. Whenever their inauguration day or the days that they take office, or somebody that's an incumbent that was. But I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I think a lot of people think that, oh, I made my voice heard, I won, my way was won, my person won. And if what you did in the ballot yesterday was like the most you're going to do to actually affect change in society, if your voice being heard is like the end of it, but you're not actually engaging in the spaces that you have influence, I think that's where things every single time get really messy. And things don't actually change. And I think we assume a lot more actually happens and changes in a presidential election. Yes, there's a lot of things at stake, but at the end of the day, all of us have much more influence in the lives of the people around us than Donald Trump does, or Kamala Harris does, or our congressmen or women do. And so I think we have to realize the influence that is given to us, given by us, that we are called to be people, especially as Christians, that are supposed to be kingdom bringers, and we have the Spirit of God living inside of us. And so we have the opportunity, whether the person we love is in power or not, whether, our religion is the dominant religion, all of those things, that we have a mandate and a responsibility to be people that are bringing Christ's kingdom, and not a MAGA kingdom or not a kingdom of Kamala, but we first and foremost have that. And I think right now, a lot of people that are Christians or non-Christians are having an identity crisis because they've given so much of their resources, so much of their money, their time, their passion, their anger, their frustration, all of that into a political process, and this has slowly become where their identity lies at the end of the day, and their maybe faith or their trust or their relationship with Christ, they don't even realize has been eroded, and they've been doing all this in the name of God, But I think I would guess that the Father is weeping or saddened by how many people have kind of abandoned this interpersonal relationship they should be having with Him for this pseudo relationship with the government or policies and procedures right now. And I think there should be a call back to repentance if that's become your identity, or your trust has been hedged into those things. That's something we have to do as believers, is first and foremost realize our identity is there and our relationship is secure there, and that we have a mandate to be kingdom bringers into this world, and not the American kingdom, because nations rise and fall, but the kingdom of Christ, which will look a lot different in so many ways to blue and red. And so we have to remember that.
Yeah, I think one interesting takeaway or observation that I had from this that maybe connects a little bit to what we do here weekly on the podcast is the influence that people might not realize that they have. And Kamala's campaign kind of relied on kind of the old format that you saw with Barack Obama and things like that, where they leaned heavily into Hollywood A-listers and those types of people to endorse. And I think, if anything, this election proved that, that style of endorsement is dead, if dying, if not dead. And you look at what the Trump campaign did with getting him on podcasts like Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan and Dave Ramsey and these Logan Paul and these people that are influencers on social media and YouTube, and have these communities that are huge, but they feel like a community of people where they're just listening to someone's voice, and they feel like they are kind of bought into that ideology. And it shows that there's so much more power in this organic social communities that are springing up all over the internet, where someone like a Joe Rogan can sit down and kind of have like a wild conversation for 3 hours with the president and influence an election. And you can just see it. You could anecdotally hear people talking at polling places about, oh, did you hear that interview with Joe Rogan? And it's like something that I think it's blindsiding traditional media in a lot of ways, whether that is Hollywood or, your CNN and Fox News and stuff, that people are not going to that for information. And so even as believers, like, how do we intersect and engage in a culture that is shifting, and where are we, investing our time, and what communities are we a part of, and maybe what communities could we be a part of building to leverage that influence?
Because wouldn't you say that this election, with what we're talking about, of going on podcasts with Joe Rogan and Jake and Logan Paul, all that. That is a new thing. I don't remember this even in 2020. I mean, with even the development of social media and how we're engaging, and we've talked about this on previous episodes. Like, there's nothing like it. Like, we don't have a GPS for where this came from.
Well, because people made a big deal. Oh, Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala. LeBron James endorsed Kamala. And it's like, it didn't mean anything. People don't really care about celebrity endorsements anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I think at large, kind of the difference is that there's certain people that are into podcasts for a reason, because they like long form storytelling, conversations, interviews that aren't curated. Like, almost anytime we have someone that's going to be on our podcast or things like that, one of the first questions I think a lot of people ask is, are you guys going to edit this?
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of people are pushing back on this. They'd rather listen to an authentic, long form, flawed thing than like a cut up segments of, you know, the 2020 interview or whatever the interviews, you know, that are typically out there. And I think people are kind of catching along that, okay, so much of that is so curated and so fed to make people look a certain way. And there's like something authentic about, you're here and you can't hide behind it, and you have to own your own stuff, and you know, things like that. We've all probably learned that.
We have. I mean, because this is not edited
at large through conversations that are good conversations, good feedback, and difficult feedback. And you're like, if I could have just edited that out, of course I would have sounded better, or you would have not sounded like this. But we've had to learn that authenticity is really a thing that matters for a lot of people. Inside of our world. So,
well, we've talked a lot about this. We've reflected a lot, as we promised.
Yes, we have.
Are there any closing thoughts that didn't get shared, or any encouragements you want to send out to our listeners before we wrap things up? I mean, I think we've talked about this for other things, but it's like, celebrate well. Like, if this is something that you're celebrating right now, do it well, do it gracefully. Don't. You know, we've seen that. I think when the Roe v. Wade got overturned, you saw a mixed bag of people kind of celebrating that poorly. Don't celebrate it at someone else's expense. But
I think if you have ruined a relationship over this, like, I know that people have gotten passionate about it. I know there's issues like life and death, literally, you know, that have hung in the balance with issues like abortion. And that's been obviously tied, especially in Nebraska, with the 434, which, you know, which resoundingly won. And then that's tied into all the politics, that there's certainly a lot of emotion that goes into it. And I don't think people realize the damage that's been done. But most of that's pride. You know, it's our own inability to want to admit that we're wrong. And pride is just something that is only going to lead to a pathway of pain. And so that's what pride does. And only humility can get you out of what pride got you into. Yeah. And so if you have said things to a family member, if you've posted things on the internet, if you've refused to talk to somebody, if you've literally gone that deep into a relationship and then severed that relationship because of a political indifference, then one, I think that talks about your maturity and your willingness to be mature. And we're called to be mature as Christians and let the Holy Spirit work through us. And so, but I would really ask, you know, the Lord, if a relationship has been ruined because of this, man, I would just challenge you to do some business with the Lord and be the person that takes that first step towards peacemaking. That's also a step of humility. Even if somebody else doesn't want to reconcile in that kind of way, don't be passive and say, well, I'm going to wait. And they're the one that did the wrong to me. They're the one that cut this relationship up. They're the one that said this, or they hung up on me, or they did those things. I'm encouraging Christians to take that first step towards peacemaking. You can't ultimately control how somebody's response is going to be, but you can control, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I let my emotions get the best of me. I was not. And I think humility in victory and defeat can go a long way. And I think humility is the only way towards unity, but that's humility is costly because I would rather be proud. I would rather take the pathway of pride and not care about all the pain that's left in its wake, but invite the Spirit to help you and help others, I think, in that.
I also think we do not need 200 pastors to sign a commitment for us to commit to be peacemakers and to ask ourselves what that looks like.
Yeah.
And I also think our feelings are valid. If you're happy, if you're sad, if you're angry, those are valid feelings that create energy. And just being aware of what that energy does in our relationships and with us, and put that into, maybe that means you're signing up to help with the next election polls, or you're volunteering for those that are in need. I mean, this morning I woke up and signed my family up to volunteer to help at our Christmas store, because that is where, like, we need to put our energy of peacemaking and loving others into the right places. And the same people that we were yesterday, like, I hope that we're the same people today, of being aware of ourselves. But I think asking, like, what does being a peacemaker look like? What does that look like? Is, if that was part of Jesus's identity and his message, like, what does that look like? And what does protecting our peace, like we talked about earlier, look like?
Yeah. Or even like you said earlier, Jess, I mean, to kind of connect what you and Alex both have said so far, it's, make that peace, reach out to those people. But if you need to maybe let things settle down for a little bit, and you need to close that garage door until things calm down, and then open it up later, that's okay too. Thanks everybody for listening. I hope everybody's doing well. It's good to have the three of us back and have a conversation like this again. It's been too long. But if you have any questions or concerns and you'd like to reach out to us, you can do that on Instagram or TikTok at CCCOMA Podcast, or you can send us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org, or we'd love to hear your chipper, cheery voice on our voicemail at 402-885-9930. Call and leave us a voicemail. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.